Good evening. This is the Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024 meeting of the Finance Committee at the Public Safety Complex. It is 7 p.m., the start of our meeting. We have a committee membership of 7. 4 is a quorum, 5 are in attendance. I declare we have a quorum, so we are officially opened. For those who may be viewing this meeting, I would ask you not to call 911 because the police and fire department and DPW are all in this particular meeting room with us at the moment, so response may be delayed. So thank you all for coming, gentlemen and gentle ladies. So we have a full agenda, and I basically prepare it so that everything I think ultimately during the course of the evening we're going to need to discuss is on the particular agenda, and we don't get faulted for violating and talking about something that was not mentioned. So I'm going to try to do this in as organized a way as I possibly can, and we have so much to cover that I hope I can keep it orderly and you can follow what we're doing and we can get through our business, which essentially is the the budget, the override, and the warrant articles. Any one of those three could be a single meeting agenda item itself, and we have all of them before us. So the third item on our agenda is to review the select board meeting that was held Monday, April 1st, and you recall that originally it was scheduled for the 4th. Decision was made to hold it on the 1st, and now they're also holding it on the 4th as well, kind of maybe interplaying with our meeting as well. So what they discussed is listed as item 3 on your agenda are many of the things that we're going to discuss in item 4 and certain bulleted items. So rather than specifically speak about what was covered, which was the override, the budget, and the warrant articles, I'm going to kind of mix it up with the items that are bulleted for you in number 4. And I think it would be appropriate if we look at the first item, where there are 48 cost centers. And what we have not done per se is, even though we've heard presentations from the 3 main contributors, the 5 main contributors, Bay Path School, Westchester Regional School, Police, Fire, and DPW, we've not approved those budgets per se. And the question becomes, do we approve some of them and not all of them? Do we go through all 48? In which case, we may be here even longer than planned. So what I thought we would do is, and you can jump in and say we don't want to do that and that's not that right. I want to direct our attention to at least some of them. And if you don't mind, and hopefully we'll have fun with this and then we'll be done. It was not only blizzarding outside, it was blizzarding on our email from 4:30 to 5:30. I lost count as to how many came and went, but there is a budget summary which lists in one of those. I couldn't begin to tell you which one because I printed it out because I knew I wouldn't be able to find it.
Or did I miss it?
I think you missed it, Jeremy.
What time did you say?
I don't know what time. You're funny.
Well, we can narrow it down. It was between 4:30 and 5:30 today.
What's it called?
It came from Mark at 4:34.
It came from Mark.
So Jeremy.
This right here, budget memo update?
No,
Nope.
that's just the memo.
Came from
You know what
Mark
you can
if-
do, Jeremy, if you go to the website, I already think I have it uploaded on the website. As a budget material.
This one here? One of these, working
That's
budgets?
Budget details
Yep.
and working budgets, the summary.
Which one?
Do you want the summary or the details, Mark?
I'm gonna save them all.
Just a one-page summary.
Okay, so the middle doc.
4/3/24?
Yep.
No, third one from the bottom. Yep,
Working budget.
there you go.
There we go. So if we can scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a deficit there of 846, not looking to spot anybody.
848, go to the right.
But we have an email and a narrative that says 848. And the last time we were here, it was at 767, and I rounded it up to 800, and you said it's going to be 840. You know, I think at some particular point, meeting tonight, we got to button down. So can you tell us how we got from 667 to 848? Which
So I think you meant
is reflected as
767.
846 on the screen for those that are watching, but your email narrative said 848,517.
Yeah, so, and that's what it matches on the right-hand side, the 848, 517.
Okay.
So, yep, so last meeting, I think it was, what did we say, 767 and some change?
Yes.
I did mention that the collective bargaining with the police has resolved. We still have the lieutenant's contract to finish up. So the combination between the two pieces, it is in the memo tonight. I can flip to that page real quick.
So is it safe to say that 70-plus thousand dollars is the resolvement of the CBA negotiations and an estimate for the lieutenant, which is still pending?
Yep,
That's
it
fair to
will cover,
say?
it covers both.
Covers both?
Yep.
So the
And that's
lieutenant issue is resolved?
71,878. What's that?
Is it the lieutenant's issue is resolved?
Lieutenant's issue is not resolved yet. That's why we haven't broken out that number into details. We just gave you the lump sum for between the CBA and the lieutenant's contract.
So the follow-up question, is the 848 going to be higher or lower? or
No,
that's it?
848's gonna
That's the
be
number.
no more than what you see right there.
Okay. And don't mean to be unfair, but it was that one remaining issue having to do with the police department, CBA, and lieutenant. That made that change from 767 to this.
Yep, and we didn't wanna put in the numbers until
Yep.
we had something resolved,
Yep.
so
Okay.
we're there.
So if you scroll up a little bit, in terms of my mentioning a minute ago about picking and choosing, I think we should speak to accounts 310, the Bay Path Vocational School Assessment, 1310 and 1300, the Wachusett Regional School Assessment. And they are also warrant articles. But I think what we want to do is speak to the point of the budget, which could make discussion later on about the warrant articles a little quicker, but I'm not trying to have one be both, and I don't want to do one and then jump to the other. I just thought, I want everybody to have a chance to speak to the point of that particular presentation. And it was a joint meeting that was presented to the Finance Committee and Bay Path. Unfortunately, I don't think we had a quorum that evening, but several of us were there. And even though there is an increase, as you can see in this particular schedule, and correct me if I'm over-summarizing, the increase is literally the minimum contribution requirement that is imposed by formula on the school to pass to us. So we can hate it, and we can hate the increase, but the state mandated it. So there's not a lot of wiggle room.
I'd even go far as to say if you rejected it, you'd still end up paying it anyways.
Right.
Unless a majority of the, how many towns? 13
About that.
rejected it, so if Paxton says no, you're gonna get hit with it anyways, and it's gonna be exactly the same figure.
So I'm happy to have a discussion. I'm happy to say, you know, I don't want to just vote to approve a handful of them. It's implied by approving the deficit that we're approving them, or does somebody want and feel compelled to go on record as approving the budget, or does approving or disapproving the warrant, which comes up in a little while, accomplish that same thing? That's really my question. Defer to the wishes of the committee. This is when you jump in and speak.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I got a little lost there, Mark. So simplify it for me.
Do you want to approve this or not? Or is it implied that you're going to approve it if you approve the deficit?
I'm fine with approving the deficit, personally.
So then the next question would become, what about 1310, which is a regional school district?
1,300.
1300, rather. 1310 is Bay Path, thank you. Would you rather defer when we get to the warrant article to speak further about that, or do you want to have any conversation? I'm happy to wait for the warrant article. I just don't want anyone to feel that they didn't get a chance to speak on any of these. In particular, I've identified two, but there's 48 others. So are there any that you'd like to speak directly to? Okay, so the third question I have is item 1132, the reserve fund. Again, is it implied that we're approving this when we approve the overall budget, or would you like to individually speak to the reserve fund as being okay at a balance of 40,000? 3 or 4 years ago, it was at 50,000. Would you like to reduce it? What would be your wish, including you have no interest in approving it individually?
I guess one question I would just ask is, in '23, it was at 25.3. We approved it for 40 in '24. We're looking to keep level loading, level funding for '25. Again, these are not small, these are small relative to probably, as you pointed out, the 5 largest budget moves. But just, I guess, I'm in favor of voting for the deficit, but at least for people that are listening, I think and if we want to wait to the town articles, I'm fine with, but I think we should highlight the fact that, there's not much meat left on the bone, even with a 150K deficit. And that's why or 148. And that's why I'm okay voting for the deficit, because I don't think poking at any one particular thing makes sense.
Yeah, I think I agree. Perfect. Ben, adding to this is going to make it, it's just going to increase your deficit. And I don't think that, in reality, taking away from any of these accounts, there's not $848,000 combined. There's probably not $100,000 combined. I mean, last year it took us months to get what we got, and that was $100,000 out of that, so it's not.
So don't misinterpret my raising it. I'm looking to add or decrease any of it. I'm just looking to make sure everybody has an opportunity to not feel that they got sheltered from having a discussion about any of these.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is I think it's late in the game now, but I think we look at the override and the deficit as all or nothing. I think we should have all along been looking to minimize it. For me, like level funding everything in a year when we're asking people to pony up $1,000 potentially. That might not sound like a lot, but then next year we're going to have the DPW building probably. I've heard Heather mention several times the 2.5 override limit might increase. I mean, what's it going to and when? So like 2 years from now, maybe are people getting a 5% increase or a 7% increase with no vote? I just don't think people have a full package of information. It's late in the game to do that now, but I think all along we should have been looking to, I think we skip over everything if it doesn't erase the deficit, but if we could drop people from $900, out of their pocket next year to $800 or $700, that might actually be meaningful to some people, but I just think we're too far down the road to do that now. But I think, that should be our focus in the future.
Good point. If I can just not belabor an issue, but pick up on 2 points. I don't think the DPW building's coming through the pipeline next year.
Okay.
Number one, and number two is I've spoken to the fact a number of times that Proposition 2.5 is 45 years old, and maybe it's seen its day. But that would be way beyond our control to ever consider that to be a change. That would be statewide, if not nationally wide, and I don't see that happening.
Okay, so that was just like an
Anytime.
observation, not something.
Anytime.
So I heard it mentioned a few times. I didn't know if that was something
No,
that was.
glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
Heather?
I was just gonna say, folks should really take a close look at the budget, because in many cases, we've level service, but in some cases, we've actually, just in our normal budget, have reduced costs pretty close to below what they were before, right? Town accountant, last year's 33, now it's only 34,000, they're pretty tight. So it's not just level services. In many cases, there's a lot of them that are even level funded, right? They're pretty tight. You look at the fire department's one, and their numbers went up, but they didn't go up substantially. Like, they cut internally things out of their regular budget just to be able to get to this tight number to begin with. There's not any more cutting that can be done within the current projected budget without actually making cuts and starting to impact personnel at this point. I just want to make sure that's clear, so folks know, this isn't like this is what we want budget, this is what will make us happy, is what will make the departments whole. This is already a minimum level to continue providing as many of those services as we currently provide now, without having to reduce any of them in these numbers.
So would you say that we would quantify this as level funded or level services?
Well, I'd say it's still level services, because you have some numbers that have increased, right? Because you have wage increases and contractual obligations and so forth.
Taking those out of the equation.
So taking those out of the equation, everything is pretty much the same. There's 3 tiny exceptions, right? And two of them are regulated, right? One is in the DPW. This actually fixes us because it allows us to comply with the MS4 permit requirements for year 6, right? That is the unfunded state mandate. The second, and that increased by, I think if I remember my calculations correctly, about $90,000. Last year, remember, we offset 30,000 of that increase through ARPA funds. The second piece is also the safety issue, which is funding for guardrails. We talked about, Travis did a great job when he was here last time. He spoke about the concern there was an accident, it was an older form of a guardrail. To replace it was very costly, and we have at least one other that we really need to replace, or we're gonna continue having issues if people crash through those. The insurance will replace them, but they'll replace them with what's there and not actually what we actually need there. So those are the 2 pieces. And the only other increase that I'm aware of is with the COA, we reduced that budget already substantially because we ended up going out to SCM Elder Bus, and we restructured the funds that were there to provide a little bit more services to the seniors. So it was already about a 10% reduction in their budget from last year, and actually ultimately provides a few more services to the seniors than it did last year. So those are the exceptions
So
that
with
I'm
the
aware of.
exceptions of those 3, COLAs, union mandated contractual obligations, and things like, say, IT services that went out for bid and came in higher, but you gotta do it because it's what you gotta do.
Oh, I guess you're right, I apologize.
Okay, no, but I
Fixing
mean-
the IT infrastructure.
But again, so
that is-
that's almost a contractual obligation, because that's a contract that you had to take. Yeah, right, you had one bid, and that's what you got with.
For that piece, but there is the piece to fix the Wi-Fi networks and so forth, so that isn't there
Okay.
in this version.
So at some point, I don't want to do it now because it's on the screen, but if you were to walk through your revised narrative that got sent out at some particular point, I think there's a page that defines what the deficit is made up of pretty nicely. So if I can just hold that thought. But let me just drop one last shoe. If you scroll down to, it happens to be blackened out, but it's recreation. You can see it in the red. A year ago, we talked about moving that particular remaining salary to the recreation revolving 2.5, whatever it happens to be, account. And I think that was late in the game a year ago, and we decided to defer it. I think we literally said defer it because it was late, and the recreation had already dipped into their particular revolving fund for a number of other items, and now sustaining this particular expense was going to add to that. That's changed a little bit because it's a year later, and I think, I don't have it, but if you give me a minute to find it, or if we went online, we could see it. The new special revenue as of February 29th has been posted today, and there's like $600,000 in that account. So my question is, it's a personnel issue, but I don't want anybody to take it personally, is the thought was, we've got all the revenue in that particular revolving fund. We used to have some of the expenses, we moved some of the expenses, but not all the expenses, and this was a remaining one. And the argument was, well, it's a department head, maybe we keep it in our particular overall budget. So the question is, has that discussion changed, and that's what we're gonna do, is leave it here? Or are you looking for the finance committee to raise the issue about thinking about doing what we thought about doing a year ago? That's the question.
So when we started looking, so in the next version of the budget, which we're not looking at tonight, but the version that if we had to go to, the one that shows $840,000 of reductions, right, to get to a number that matches our revenues. The recreation department is removed from the town's budget and removed and directly put into just its revolving fund. So I've had lots of conversations with Kathy and Jeff regarding recreation. So a couple of things, right? So the special revenue funds of $229.24 that Larissa sent Mark and I today and that she's posting tomorrow, I actually show the number going in right now. The most recent annual revenue is $88,564, expenses $74,741, total of $224,560. So I don't know if it was the 600, but I don't have that on my number.
Could have been looking at probably was looking at the ambulance fund.
That might be. So 224. So I had a long conversation, and what Jeff said is, for the past couple of years, they've been rolling with about 200,000 they're carrying year to year. The rest, like the 24,000, is mostly payroll that hasn't gone out yet for the after-school program and any of the other vendors they pay for. What he figured, and when he did his calculation, so remember last year Kathy started keeping track of all the programs in that Excel sheet, right, to figure out how things are doing, what's breaking even, what's bringing in a profit, and what's, in the red. And there's always gonna be programs that are in the red, right? Like, an example is, when they do Easter egg hunt, when they do the Christmas, the holiday tree lighting, all those things, they're not bringing in any revenue, they're just expending. Other things, they bring in funds. Some programs are profitable, some aren't. At the end of the day, he figured that they're making just a little bit each year that adds to that 200,000 they're carrying over. Right now, the split between the recreation director's pay as well as her benefits to the town side is 66.5%, to the recreation revolving fund is 33.5%. If you remember, last year was the first year we included taking a percentage of her benefits. So we take out, health insurance, Medicare, all those pieces. We actually take the percentage out, the 33.5, and already charge it directly or bill the revolving fund for that. So right now, that number there, the 32,707, that is 66.5% of her salary. In the modified version, we take that out. When you take that out, to Jeff's calculations, he believes they have about 4 years they can sustain paying for the director out of their revolving fund before they run out of money in the revolving fund. They can increase some fees, but the concern is if you increase fees more than your competitors around us, you're gonna lose participants in the program because it's gonna be less expensive to go somewhere else. So even with increasing fees, he figures it's got about 4 years. And someone will present on that for recreation on Monday when we're before the select board of what that would look like. But it would reduce quite a bit of their services without having it there and having to take it out of the revolver.
So is your recommendation to leave it as it is?
My recommendation at this time would be to leave it where it is, yes.
Good, fair enough. So would it be fair to ask or to say, can you walk us through your narrative that was, it was sent twice?
Yeah, whichever version, doesn't matter.
It was-
What's it called?
It's the it's the memo one.
Budget memo update?
Yeah. I was trying to answer Mark's questions in the memo. Did I answer all of them? Some of them? A few of them? None of them? Okay.
Let me.
You'll get
reserve
back to me.
My answer for a minute.
All right, so you have our revenues here, 15,944,440. Our expenses, 16,792,855. Deficit, 848,517. So the first part is the revenues, 15,944,440. So that currently includes two numbers in there, free cash being 518,681 and ambulance 461. So I just want to clarify, I'll get into this a little bit later, but just in case anyone's confused. So the 518,681 is the amount of free cash we have remaining for this year that we can expend. We're going to be taking $9,200 out of that for the police cruiser outfitting. The reason the number's still included in the free cash here, because the way we've currently done our documents with our revenue and then the expense sheet, is we generally include on the revenue all the money we're using, including what we're using to fund articles. So that will come up a little bit later. Likewise, on the ambulance side, we have $400,000 for ambulance receipts reserved at this point we're putting towards the budget. The $61,000 you see in there is because, again, we have an article on the town meeting warrant for the cardiac unit and the cardiac care unit and the Lucas device. So that's where the $61,000 comes
So
from.
can I just speak to that?
Sure.
So that we're not confusing anybody?
Yep,
Not the least of which, the first second I saw it, I was confused. Because there's $400,000 of ambulance receipts in the budget. There was talk about another 60, which brought it up to 460, and then I saw 461, but those are not apple and apple. The 400,000 is the ambulance receipts. The 61,000 was a recommendation by the Capital Improvement Planning Committee to put forward an article to fund from ambulance receipts health-saving monitors. So there's the 61 and the 60, which you might think are the same, but they're actually two different things.
correct.
And we'll see the 61,000 in an article a little bit later on.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, expenses, so as we mentioned earlier, so it's a $71,878 increase from your last budget that you had in your hand last week, and that is representing the increases for all of the contracts on the police side. Then you have other expenses, this is just an overall breakdown here, so $16,792,855, of which $7,786,547 is the Wachusett Regional School District numbers. Bay Path is 590,026. That makes the town side 8,223,243, and then the town articles 193,141. Those town articles, because Mark asked for some details on them, so this was on the detail sheet, the second page of the expense sheet. So 1,100, it's its own article for greenways. That's the joint collaborative we've been doing for a number of years. The 121,841 is the amount we use for road surfacing. That is the amount that comes in when we looked at the revenue sheet. At the top, we have the road exclusion fund, which is the amount of money we're pulling each year that we tax for that piece, and that lands over here. It has to wash out. And we have that again, it's an article. Police Department, $9,200. That's what we talked about a little bit earlier with regards to outfitting the police cruiser as an article. $61,000 for the Lucas and cardiac monitor, again as an article, totaling $193,141.
So the right-hand side,
Yep,
what you said, with all four are articles this evening that we're going to vote on.
correct.
The Wachusett is essentially a budget cost to us. The 61,000 is funded by ambulance receipts. The 9,200 is funded by free cash. And the roads and highways and paving has been part of our budget for the last 5 years that I can remember, maybe longer.
Yep, we raise the money on the tax side, and then we expend the money on the
Right,
expense side.
right.
Okay, so, any more questions on that so far?
Nope.
Okay, so deficit drivers, so this is the same information you had back on the 14th, so nothing's really changed here, except I updated a couple numbers below and I still made an error. So if you scroll down to the expense notes a little bit further, Jeremy, if you would. The fire budget number is there, as well as other various town increases. That number should actually be 10,000 less, and the police budget should be about $10,000 more, $10,000 more, because I forgot to account for just the initial change from last year's budget, which I think was like 1,213,000 and some change, to 1,224,000. Which, so it's about $11,000 that should be added there. So I'll update that and just get it back to people, so you have it. Yes, Mark?
Roman numeral 5.
Yep.
Travis is here, so I think he is, and correct me if I'm not mistaken. I think you should add $60,000 is in that budget for guardrails. And I think that's a big ticket item that, unless, I don't see it there.
I would venture a guess that I already accounted for that in that number, because I went with 175,913. So I think I was going for, I can break it out, Mark.
Well,
and
no, the
just mention-
175 it's in that number, but
Yes,
your
yes.
detail beneath it.
I can
you-
break it
You're
out.
describing wastewater management and the like, but that's 90,000. You got 60,000 for guardrails. There's 150,000 of his increase, neither of those of which we would want to cut from the budget. One's mandated by the state, and the other is a safety issue. So I would add it, because I think it speaks well for supporting what the increase is.
I can do that. Okay, and then school override amounts. So I don't know if you want to go into this part, Mark, at this time.
I think we're going to do that next, but my concern is that if we can go to the front page. We spent a lot of time right there, deficit. We spent a lot of time last week with 7 different options of deficits. And we were using adding back or not adding back. Ambulance receipts of 400,000. That's a solid number. We were using adding back $500,000 for free cash, but technically it could be 518, or depending upon a vote this evening, it could be 509. But here's the kicker. We were always using a budget deficit of 800,000 to calculate what our tax rate impact on any of those overrides, and now the truth of the matter is the deficit isn't 800,000, it's 848. So all of those need to be tweaked or revisited, or we're just gonna work in round numbers and live with them. But I'm just saying that sheet that we could maybe revisit again this evening qualified it by saying these are rounded for discussion purposes, but now that we're zeroing in on what that override number might be, I think we need to zero in on what the components of that is going to be. And disappointingly, the deficit is bigger, which is going to cost the override to be bigger, or less if we move it around, but I just think we need to work with the correct numbers, and that was not available to us last week when we sent out that draft for consideration. We actually took a position on one of the overrides that now may have changed because some of the numbers have changed, and maybe we need to revisit that. That doesn't answer anything. I'm just saying it's kind of a segue into the override. So now the question to the committee is, would you like to go to the town warrants, of which there are 17, or do you want to go to the override, or which one do you want to do first? I'm inclined to go to the town warrants first.
I think there was a change from what we had discussed as far as how many articles. I think I would go to the warrants as well.
Wasn't the override in the warrant?
Yep. Now, believe it or not, that was sent to you today as well, an updated version. I have no idea. Ben, you're the timekeeper. I don't know what time it got sent.
503?
I believe Jeremy.
I just keep opening stuff till I get the right one.
Yep, 503.
we go.
There we go. So, Heather, what say you if I let you drive the bus here on the administrative articles?
Sure. What would you like me to cover, Mark?
You tell me, do you want to read them in their entirety?
No.
Or just ask for a motion as they are written? But I think we need to vote on them. And
So-
if you want to add a little color commentary to each one, I think that would be appropriate.
So I would just say, so first of all of these articles are before the town council. They're supposed to get me a response back by tomorrow of any changes that they'd like to make. Substantially, there shouldn't really be any that we know of. Everything should be all set. The first couple articles here, you have bylaw articles, right? So you have revolving fund bylaw, they're attached. Again, everyone should have already had these ones. None of this has changed. The only thing that changed was the very last two articles, and that's just the language of the last two articles. Everything else is exactly the same as it has been for a few weeks. So you have the revolving fund bylaw, which just cleans some things up and adds the planning board to that list. You have the council on aging bylaw, which is a bylaw to replace the current two small versions that are there, and that's been discussed at prior select board meetings. You have the recreation commission bylaw. This bylaw is is a little bit more than what they currently have on the books. There is one anticipated change to the Recreation Commission bylaw, and at this point, when I sent it back to legal, I just let them make the change, and that is simply, I apologize, but I omitted how long terms were when we drafted the bylaw, and I didn't catch it. So he will have to add that piece. So that piece will change. I don't think it will change anyone's view of the bylaw from FinCom's perspective on whether they would move forward with it or not. And then you have in the administrative section, just Chapter 90 authorization. This is just the standard article that we have every year for Chapter 90 that allows the town to say, yes, thank you for giving us this money. We will now give it to the DPW to expend.
So we need to vote on a recommendation to approve, disapprove, or take no action individually on each one of these. Now, these have been back and forth to town council. Are they ready for prime time this evening for us to vote recommendation? Or
I
are they
would-
still subject to amendment or change, or what's your recommendation?
There's always a possibility that the bylaw itself gets a tweak from town council, so it's up to FinCom whether or not you guys want to make a vote on them this evening, and then they could possibly have a couple words changed. The COA bylaw's already been to town council, I want to say twice, so there shouldn't be really any
It's
changes
not so much
there.
the bylaws, but the article as
Oh,
it's
the articles should be pretty much the way they are. I mean, it's our
Okay.
standard language of the articles. Sometimes legal likes to change the last phrase where it's, or take any related action thereto, and change it to, or take any relative action. So,
So let me go. Article 1, bylaw revolving fund bylaws. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion to approve or disapprove?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Finance Committee approves. Article 2. Bylaw regarding the Council on Aging.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Second.
Second.
Any discussion? None. All in favor of approving?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. That is approved. Bylaws for the Recreation Commission. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. It is approved. Article 4, Chapter 90 authorization. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Approved? Second?
Second.
Second? Discussion? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. It's approved. Repurpose. Article 5 of the 2022 annual meeting, which, if I'm not mistaken, was the new phone system for the town buildings. Can you speak to that, Heather?
Sure. So, we had originally asked the town for funds to be able to upgrade our phone system. The or the public safety building was upgrading their phone system, along with Holden Dispatch, and we wanted to do ours at the same time. We did some additional research. We ended up switching over to the voice over internet protocol as opposed to more of the standard phone system. It reduced the cost substantially, and we ended up having a balance remaining. We would like to repurpose what's currently left there to start doing some of the upgrades to the Wi-Fi in the different buildings. We thought that was a good use of those funds. Similar nature, both IT, but also just going back to the town and say, can we use this to put towards that so we don't have to ask for all of the funds again?
So what's the, can you dollarize that for us? How much is
Is there a
left?
reason why yeah, and why isn't it on, wouldn't we have a dollar amount?
So sometimes we just say, we don't always, I think, put our dollar amounts in the warrant. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, but,
Do you know how much it is?
it's about 15,000, we're just waiting for that final number. There were a few departments who are looking to purchase a pair of the headphones to go with the phone, so we're just trying to finish up those purchases to make sure we have a total number.
So just informationally,
Yep.
27 was budgeted and 15 is left over?
So the cost to buy regular phones versus do VoIP is much higher. When we switched over to the VoIP, because remember, when you're doing voice over internet protocol, you're doing a couple things. You have to buy the actual device, right, the actual phone itself. Then you also have a monthly fee for that phone, but you're getting rid of your Verizon bill for the phone. So,
It's a friendly question because it's a good result. It just strikes me as being high. And I'm glad it's high.
so the cost, I don't know if we know, Mike, do we know the total cost it took us to upgrade all the phones here? I know we didn't pay for it directly, so we may not have known.
No idea, yeah. I
But
can
it
tell
wasn't
you.
inexpensive. Sean's behind you. You're looking for him.
No, I think that, no. I was actually looking for Mark, because I don't know
Oh,
if Mark
Mark, do you know?
knew the cost, yeah.
But it wasn't cheap.
Oh, no, but that was covered through the state
Yeah.
911 grant.
And
yeah.
those are the regular phone system. That's not switching it over to VoIP.
So last year we put how much, 27?
27.5.
27.5, and it ended up costing us 12.
Yeah, good story.
That's good to me.
Yep. Is there a motion?
Uh-oh.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Motion carries. Revolving fund for expenditure limits. This is pretty standard. Every year, the amount might have been changed on a couple of them. Do you want to speak to,
Planning board's new.
Yeah, so the only new one is the planning board,
Yeah.
and that's the only one with really a change here. The planning board was added this year, so what we've been doing up to this point is a lot of the fees that have come in for consultants, instead of having it made to the town and then us covering the cost of the consultant bill, we were having the applicant pay the consultant directly, so the costs were relatively, within the range of under 20,000, but close to it. We just weren't having the funds pass through us. What we found, though, is we were running into issues where sometimes applicants weren't very timely with paying the consultant when they were supposed to be paying the consultant. And then that puts our relationships with our consultants in jeopardy, right? They're doing work on behalf of the town that the applicant's supposed to pay for. So we just want to make it pass through the town first to make sure we cover those pieces. So that's why the number's 20,000, because we've never collected 20,000 in general for our revenues for planning board in the past. We generally collect, around 1,000, 2,000 most for the fees, but this is just essentially to allow the funds to pass through. There will be some that remain, but for the most part, they're gonna be a pass-through.
and the recreation was one that we voted, then we came back and we increased, so the 250 is hopefully designed to prevent that from having to occur.
Yeah, we're hoping, I mean, the only way that would go up is if they have a substantial increase in the number of participants, they add a new program, or if they double their fees.
Their money.
We're the only gig in town for summer camp this year too, because probably won't be one at the rec center camp won't be there, so maybe
Oh.
maybe they'll see an increase, but that $250 should be enough to handle it, I would think.
Yeah, I guess one request I have, and I know the articles are written, so we can't change anything, but when you word it like this, people don't know what's changing.
So there's a, I don't think Mark has it yet, so he wouldn't have sent it out. I have an information sheet that I attach usually when you get to town meeting, but this year I pretty much have it all ready to go. So when I post this online, that information sheet I'll actually post in front of this. It explains each article, what it is, what it's doing, what the changes are.
Okay.
And if you have any thoughts on that when it comes out, let me know. I can always update it.
Thank you. Good question. Good observation. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second,
Is there a second?
yes.
Second. Any discussion? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. It passes as approved. Article 7, this is kind of a outfitting of a new cruiser, and the proceeds that were generated was from the sale of an old cruiser. Can you,
Sure.
I know Chief is here, but if you want to take a first bite of that apple?
I'll give it a go, and if I missed anything, he'll fill in for me. I'm sure he will. So we had a cruiser from the Anna Maria College. We've, in the past, used to trade in the cruiser as part of a purchase of a new cruiser. But it's actually more beneficial for the town sometimes to sell the vehicle outright as opposed to doing it that way. We get a better price for it, so more money coming back. In general, what generally happens is when we sell a vehicle for surplus and anything else for surplus, it rolls into our revenue sheet under miscellaneous non-recurring. It's something we can't budget for. It stays there until the year end. It rolls over to free cash. One of the things, and we even have it in our surplus policy, is that we will do everything we can to continue to encourage departments to part with things they're not using, part with things that, you know, it's time to turn over, but also try to get the money to return back to that department. So normally we'd wait until the fall to try to come back to get the funds to return back towards AMC / the police department. However, because they purchased this new vehicle and they normally would have used those funds that they would have saved to actually outfit the vehicle, we would like to kind of take a withdrawal, if you will, from free cash this year in lieu of taking it from next year so that they can go ahead and outfit that new vehicle that they're getting. So, Chief, did I miss anything?
No,
Okay.
pretty much.
One question I have is there some reason, and there might be a valid reason, that the gift from Anna Maria did not include the outfitting? Is that?
It does.
Okay.
But in the past, since like 2011, what we did is when they buy a car, we outfit in town. So I have a guy that does it. That saves us like $3,000 to $5,000. In the past, when I would trade in the car that Anna Maria buys, that money would get used for them purchasing a car to bring their costs down the same as I do for the town side.
Okay.
So this money here is from a car they already purchased, and we're using it to bring their costs down a little bit.
Okay.
Because really, that money came from them, it wasn't our tax dollars, and we've been doing it like that for like 13 years now. And this is the first year that we're gonna be coming and asking to get it from free cash, but technically the money is there from the sale of the car.
So the sale of the car was a non-recurring revenue, got dumped into free cash, now we're taking that and using it to outfit the cruiser.
Yes, and
You're right, they should pay for the retrofitting, but they should also get the money for the
Yeah,
sale.
yeah, for the trade-in of the cruise, so.
So they didn't
okay,
get that,
yes.
so.
Nope,
so
makes
I think
sense, makes
we're-
sense.
We're even, we're squared. Good question, though. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Chief, you can't make the motion, somebody from the finance committee's gonna make it. Is there a
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second?
Second.
Second? Any discussion? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Passes. Free cash, OPL, state, help us out, Heather. I know you've discussed it a couple of times with us, so one more time.
So on my information sheet handout that will go in front of this, you can actually link to it to get to the state guidelines. So essentially, Finance Department followed the information we got originally from the state, which was, they said at the end of last year, the money we got from the class action lawsuit that a lot of the municipalities had joined, allowing us to get some money back from the opioid settlement in small amounts, right? You got like 2,000 from Walmart, 1,000 from Walgreens, 200 over here, $23 over here. We were able to put it and just roll it into free cash and then be all done with it. And most communities did that. But then the state came out and said, oh no, you need to put this into a special revenue fund. Okay, or some other kind of fund. Well, the problem is at this point, it was already in free cash. So then we have to go back to the townspeople, now that we've rolled it to free cash, and said, hey, we need to take it from free cash and move it into the special revenue fund. The special revenue fund does not need approval from town meeting to expend, but we need money to take money out of, we need approval to take money out of the free cash to put it there. So that will transfer the $5,089.46 that is sitting there. Mark, in the most recent piece that you have, there's currently a balance this year so far of money that has rolled into that account. Now, what can we spend that money on? That is a great question. Not much. It has to be opioid education or opioid treatment or training or something related to that. So once we get through the budget season, I will sit down with public safety and we'll see if there's anything we can come up with that we can expend those funds that will ultimately be somewhere, I think, around 10K, give or take, by the time they're done. So the opioid right now has $883.45 in it, but we just got a few more installments last month, so bring it up to a couple thousand plus the 5,000.
So the abbreviated version, again, this was money that the state gave us for opioid. We put it into free cash until we found out we couldn't do that. Now we have to put it into the special revenue fund.
For the most part, the one change of the state didn't give us the money, but the state said we could do that with it.
Okay.
Yes.
State certified our free cash.
Got it.
Right. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. It is approved. $61,000 from ambulance receipts for life-saving monitors. I'll just add that, number one, the chief is here, he can speak to it if he'd like to, but this was presented to CIPC, and literally in the floor before you, there was a CPR demonstration and apparatus and the value and the life-saving measures of these, so it got unanimous support from CIPC, and here it is in an article, again, funded by ambulance receipts, so a valuable piece, number of pieces of equipment have a long life, but not really costing the taxpayers per se anything on their tax rate because it's coming from ambulance receipts. So a lot of reason to support it, so. Chief, you think you need to add anything to that, or?
No, sir. Thank
Yep, we're
you.
good?
Make a motion to approve?
Second.
All in, discussion? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Motion passes. Water enterprise. This essentially is the water department, AKA an enterprise fund. Truth is, if their expenses exceed $1,225,000, then they increase their water rates. And if they're less than the water revenue that they projected, they get to keep the surplus. It's their enterprise fund and part of their retained earnings, so we don't need to incur the cost if they're underwater, no pun intended, and we don't get the benefit and the surplus if they're above. So it's a bit of a perfunctory warrant article, but one that appears every year. So, any Discussion before, or is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Motion is approved. Warrant article is approved. Number 11, know a little bit about it, but anybody want to add to the water tank maintenance?
Sure. Give me 1 second here. I'll just go to my explanation sheet.
Yeah, I guess one question as you go to it, it lists a sum and it also says, or any other sum. Is that,
So we standardly put that on any monetary, so what happens when you get to town meeting, right? The moderator generally will allow you to operate within the four corners of the article. So you always give yourself some leeway. If something changes, something else happens, that you can make any amendments. And it's usually recommended language by legal to make sure you include that, because if something changes, you want to be able to make that amendment on the floor and not be handcuffed to what's on there.
okay.
That being said, so the article allows the water enterprise to expend $20,681 of the retained earnings. This is to cover the 6th out of the 15th year of the annual contract with Suez for maintenance repair of the Asnabumskit Road water storage tank.
Could the minutes read that Finance Committee members hate that phrase or any other sum?
Sure.
Okay, so noted. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Warrant article is approved. Appropriations for road improvements, essentially 12 and 13 are cousins. One is to put the money in and the other is take the money out. Is that a fair summation?
I would say instead of put the money in, it's to raise the money.
Raise the
right?
money.
Because this one's one of
To put
those
in.
that has a specific tax piece to it. And a number of years ago, we had voted that, I believe it was in May of 16 for FY 17, that the town could do this. And each year, it increases the number by 2.5%.
Good clarification, well said. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, a second.
Second.
Discussion? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. It is approved. Article 13.
12 for 12.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Motion, did I say that right? Approved? No. Opposed, none, abstentions, none, it passes. Okay. Wachusett Greenways. Heather, you want to just speak quickly to that? $1,100. This is a budget item, but feeling when it was first introduced 5 years or so ago, was at 1,000, and the argument was, this is a corporate asset, a regional Wachusett asset, and all the regional towns and others were asked to contribute it, and we were a good corporate citizen at that time when it was first introduced, and we've done so every year. It's $1,000. It's not going to balance our budget if we oppose it, and I think there's good reason to support it, but you want to add anything to that at all, Heather?
Yep, last year it went up to 1,100.
It did, went up by $100.
What's
The only
it
thing I
for?
have to add.
I have no, what is it? I know it's for Wachusett Greenways. What are they?
The rail trail.
Oh. Okay. Motion to approve.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. I need to abstain. I support it, but I need to abstain because I have a client relationship with them. So one abstention. Article 15, Bay Path budget. Spoke a little bit about that. One question I have, Heather, is the budget 590 or 595? I think their presentation was 595.
Let me double check my sheet. I could have made an error. Hold on.
Their presentation, I'm on page 17.
There's 590 on the budget sheet.
Go to that presentation, page 17. Now, it could be that the presentation was draft.
No, you might be right. We need, can we come back to this one, Mark? I want to just double check and make sure I'm not reading it in the incorrect spot.
That might be 2 hours from now. You sure you want us to come back to it?
Yeah, just give me a couple minutes. I just want to double check on my assessment sheet. I must have written that wrong.
When did we talk about that?
I would say that you're right, Mark, on that. That's what I have on the sheet. I must have wrote it incorrectly. 595009.
Can we still vote to make a recommendation on it with the qualification that it's just going to be verified and checked?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if you just make a motion to approve it as the, once the assessment number is verified, because it's not going to change much, but.
So will that be the understanding that the motion that will be made to
Yeah, I think we can.
recommend, approve, or disapprove based on the number being
I think the
finalized?
0.8% is gonna swing us.
Right. I earlier this evening said that that increase is largely in part minimum contribution. We don't like it, we gotta pay it anyways. So, there was, in the presentation on that page, which I won't call up, literally said there was no other increase other than what the state mandated them to do. So, I could argue that that's as fair as it can be. So is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? None, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Warrant article passes. Article 16, Wachusett Regional School District. I'm going to dispense with the motion second in discussion and would welcome discussion on the front end of a motion being made. Giving everybody a chance
Did
to
I-
stop before I do.
This is, so, did we look at this last week and this was one article, right?
Yeah, it's a good point.
Right, we had the town-
Carol might want to speak to this. I was there on Monday night. If you recall, there was a consideration at one time that Articles 16 and 17 would be one article. And there was a little bit of noise from the Finance Committee, not the entire committee, but some membership that it should be two. There was further discussion about that, and the board, Select Board that is, Monday night, agreed and decided themselves that it should be two articles. And I'll advance one of my considerations is that there are people who strongly support the school, and there are people that think it should be 2.5%, and it's not. And feeling was we should give both of those, and I said schools of thought, no pun intended, an opportunity to vote on it. And that's why it's two articles, which I think is a is a wise decision, and thank the select board for making that determination themselves as well. And I think Carol led that discussion, if I'm not mistaken. I came in a little late, but I think that was the case. So now it's 2 articles.
How does the math work on that? Because the deficit's larger than the,
So the reason I requested a meeting on Monday was
You're
because.
gonna get scolded by Scott in a minute. Do you have a?
She's got it.
turned it on.
You do? Yeah, okay.
I'll start again. So, after the meeting on last Monday, I had second thoughts about the article because, as I understood it, the article was combining both the town's budget and the school budget, Wachusett budget, but we was only doing an override. This was in my mind on the town. So I didn't understand why Wachusett was getting lumped into that article when the override didn't affect the school. And that's why I brought it to the board, and we had a meeting to discuss it, and ultimately we put it into 2 articles, and we could be putting the Wachusett article on Proposition 2.5 as well. So we haven't voted on that in its entirety, but it's now for you to give your recommendation, and we'll take it up tomorrow.
but I guess just pure finance numbers. The budget went up 600K. Our deficit is 854. This one says this is contingent on an override. 17 says it is not. I don't, how does that work?
So this is saying it's on contingent.
Right, look, but this is not the whole deficit.
We haven't got a number there yet, and I think that's what's going to be discussed. So this is only a draft. The numbers aren't in there. Others give you some information in your packet of some scenarios.
So what,
Well, hold on, when you say.
Hold on one
when you say
second, Jeremy.
800 When you say 848,000, with ambulance receipts, with free cash.
Right, so it gets even bigger if we say no.
Right,
we wanna
but
leave
just,
those
I
there.
mean, you're looking at this saying, well, this is off by 600 and change. The town still has a pretty big, this is a big chunk. And I get what Carol was saying, you know, if you go both of them on the override, it kind of does make it look like it's just the town.
Why?
Because these guys, I mean, again, what's this, 4.9%?
Yeah.
Increase over last year?
Yep.
When all we can do is 2.5%,
No, that's all the town can ask for additional revenue.
right?
If you look at the departments and figure out what percentage every department goes up, it's more than 4.5%.
So
So
you're saying
if-
Wachusett's bigger?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you look at discretionary spending, if you scroll, so minimum local contribution is 1/3 of that. So as Mark said with Bay Path, there's nothing we could do about that. So that's 1/3 of the 600. Now we're down to 400, right? 200 is transportation. So if you want to poke around, if you look at what the big one you can poke at is discretionary spending. That went up 200K. So, you know, to me, if we as a town are looking at where are places that we can make changes to, you look at a percentage, this went up 200K relative to discretionary spending. And so you don't have a town without a school, right? So to say it's not part of the town, I think is a tough thing to say.
I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying. When we was looking at that article, when we were combining them, we wasn't putting any contingency on the school, yet we was including in that article. So I wasn't saying when I said I wanted it separating that I wanted a contingency on the school. I was just saying that I wanted the article for our town to represent what we were putting on override just for the town. And what came back from the discussion on Monday was, well, we could, as Heather suggested, cut it by $5, and that's the school. It's a paper cut. It's not doing anything, it's just saying that we don't support it. But in my mind, like I say, I think differently probably to other people, I couldn't see that we could put both the school and the town together when we was only putting an override on the town, but we was including the school in the article.
Right, so the risk
And I
you
agree,
have.
and I agree with you saying, if we did an override on the school, we could only say on the operational, as you said, the discretionary part. We can't do an override on the minimum local contribution, the debt, or the transportation, because they have to pay those.
Right.
The operational account is the one where they request them out. So I agree with you entirely on that.
But-
So what we've got to decide is, are we putting the override all on the town, or are we going to split it?
Well, here's the trick, right? So we all know that this budget passes regardless if 4 other towns vote for it.
I agree entirely.
So,
Okay.
so the risk we're putting up by having it only on the school is if we say no and then the other 4 towns agree,
We still got to pay it.
no, we got to pay that, and now we have an $800K deficit for the town.
We understand that.
Well, I know you understand that. I think the
And that's-
risk is the people that vote for this are gonna, the way this is worded
And
is,
I don't think it's worded anywhere at the moment.
look at the title.
But it's not saying all of it. We haven't come up
agree
with an
with you.
800, or we haven't come up with no number yet.
I agree with you, but most people will come in here and read the title that says override contingent budget. Scroll down to the next one real quick, Jeremy. Budget not contingent on override.
So that should be, that's a typo
That's
on
a
my part.
typo.
Yeah.
And we
So-
also
Okay,
spelled-
that's
So-
a big typo.
Yeah.
I know,
I
but,
understand why you're confused.
I get what you're saying now.
Yeah, I haven't got that far.
so just to clarify for folks and folks at home, so when we originally looked at this a week or so ago, there was 2 articles for the budget. The first one was the school in the town, the second one was the school in the town. The idea was that the first ones were contingent upon the successful passage of an override. And the second one was, if the override fails, here's a budget we have to operate under. At the select board meeting on Monday, the decision was made to not have that backup article at all for either of them. So you just had the override questions, right? The first one, the budget's contingent upon the override for the school. The second one, the budget's contingent on the override for the town. And just for the record, this is one of the reasons we send things to legal and other people, because I make mistakes, right? It happens. So the title of that will be changed. But the idea here, again, is that you have those 2 pieces. So,
I understand now. It's- you
Okay.
got rid of the not.
We haven't got as far as that then, sorry.
It clears a
Okay.
whole lot of questions.
So let me jump in and say the 2 things. Heather, on this article,
Yeah.
the FY '25 request number is right from their presentation.
it should be, I've double checked, I figured out what happened with the Bay Path one. I didn't include the transportation number of 4,982, so it messed up my final number.
So we got a bigger
So the
deficit.
number is 495.
595,
595,
009,
right,
yes.
right,
yes.
okay. Well, let me just speak
Well,
to,
we can verify.
I triple checked it, but Jeremy can quadruple and I
so
wouldn't
can
be.
you go to
So what do
page?
you want to look at, you want to look at our final
Yeah, just
contribution numbers?
triple check.
Well,
FY 7786547.
see,
Yeah.
here's my point.
7786547.
On the warrant article, I don't think the prior year numbers are correct, which led to Ben make the comparison that he made.
So,
It's
remember,
not because, look at here, ready?
Could be wrong.
7177576, and what I've got here, prior year, 766, no.
748.
748.
It's actually
Right,
less of a
right.
change.
That's what
Right.
was approved. This is what came in after.
Right.
so I can go back and double check the number in the box to make sure last year's number's right, but to Carol's point, it gets dicey because, remember, we approved a number and then they went back in and they lowered the number after we approved the number. But
What,
we
with the-
generally say, well, huh?
With excess and deficiency money they gave us?
Yeah, they lowered our
They gave us
number.
40 grand.
So
That's
they
approved.
still lowered the number,
Okay.
right? We
Not
held
that
off on
much.
having our town meeting last year in hopes that their number would be in so that we
Right.
wouldn't have to pull as much from operating stabilization and the like as a result. So, but we will go back in and double check that to make sure the FY '24 approved numbers, but it's gonna be approved as in what we approved at town meeting. So I'll pull last year's town meeting warrant, just triple check that the number's right.
I've got, I got the number for that.
Okay.
Do you want it?
What'd you have for last year?
Sure, what do you have?
7477459.
7458, so it's pretty close, right? So it's, that's where they get the 4.39%
Can
increase.
you stay on that page right
Yeah.
there? So this is page 29 of their presentation. Again, we had a joint meeting, Tony was there, Jeremy and I were there. Again, we unfortunately didn't have a quorum, but we spoke to the matter. I have a problem with this page right here. This is the total assessment that was sent out to the towns, 6.12%. And my point is, we're locked in at 2.5%. So we gotta come up with that other, in our case, our amount is only 4.39, but I'll speak to that in a minute. Even at 4.39, if we can only go up 2.5%, public safety, public works, we gotta make cuts in order to balance this. I have a problem with that. Secondly, and I think you'll know this, Ben, the state formula that calculates that is as flawed can be. And it's been like that for 20 years. Here's my point. Next year, we could be 8.46. This year, we're only 4.39, which I have a problem with, but I don't know what next year is gonna bring. And there have been people like yourself, which I respect very much, and I'm a educator myself. I'm in favor of education. I'm not in favor of this budget. But it was always said, it's for the kids. And here's a quote from the landmark when the superintendent made a presentation to Sterling, quote, "We don't have anything in the budget that will move things forward for the kids." That's a quote.
Yeah.
And he said something similar to that this evening. So if it's for the kids, and the superintendent himself is saying, well, that's not baked into the budget, then that's troublesome. And the Sterling Finance Committee Chairman said, not being present at our meeting, but I said the same thing. There are problems that this particular administration, but more so, sorry to say, the school committee and the Business and Finance Subcommittee, that almost bankrupted that school. They missed payroll, they had to withdraw from reserve funds, and that's baked into this particular budget. And we're paying for those mistakes, and I'm not in favor of that. I want to give them enough so that they can function, but I don't want to pay for errors that they made that they haven't owned up to, and they just simply pass it on to the particular towns for the very point that you're making. Wow, they gotta get 2 towns, they gotta oppose that. They might have 1, but they'll never have 2. Well, last year, the Finance Committee voted against it. And that was a courageous vote. Unfortunately, that's not how the Select Board voted, and that, confused the residents at town meeting. But I'm of the position, stand alone this year. If we're the only one that opposes it, so what? And you know what? If we oppose it, maybe another town will have the courage to step forward, and they'll oppose it, and then it will go back to the school committee to reduce the budget. Because right now, they're just pushing it forward, thinking it's never going to fail with 2 towns. It might fail with 1, but never 2, so we're going to get what we want, and we end up having to foot the bill. And every year, it's going to get worse. When I first got on this particular Finance Committee, everyone was scared to death that it was going to hit $100 million. We're at 121, waving at it, going by, and that the superintendent said, that's not even enough. It should be 131 this year. Well, what's it going to be next year, 145 million? At some particular point, we got to take a stance. I think this is the year to do it. I thought last year was the year to do it. We missed that opportunity. This year, I think we ought to take a stance, send them a message, and you know what? If we happen to be the only one, then we've shown some courage, and then we'll meet as a finance committee and come up with a different solution. But rolling over because we were afraid that somebody else is not going to join us, I think it's a lack of leadership, and I think it's putting the town in peril because we're just going along to get along, and that's not my DNA. I'm not going to vote in favor of it. You may vote in favor of it. I'm telling you right now, I'm not.
No, I think that's a fair statement, but look, I mean, let's dissect a little bit of what you just provided. So the superintendent said that there's nothing in here for the kids. So if they wanted to put stuff in here for the kids, you would be even louder, right? If that 4.39 was 8%, because we're gonna redo the field and we're gonna do this, all for the kids, right? If there was $5 million, new classrooms, new computers, all this good stuff, the chants would get louder. So I've been on both sides. I've been on the finance committee. I was on the business and finance when we screwed up with bus routes and we did all that. Those are individual screw-ups. Yeah, you're right. People screwed up on their job and they're no longer there. So the question is how do we move forward, right? We could talk about history all we want. We can talk about that, yep, they screwed up, they didn't do that right. The superintendent's, what, 2 years now? So every administration has carried on from the sins of the previous one. Unfortunately, that all costs money, right? The screw-ups and all. So the question we have in front of us is, if we look at the discretionary spending, you talk 2.5%. That's just the calculation. If all we did was calculation, we wouldn't pay for buses, throw that out the window, right? We wouldn't pay for debt services. Actually, our debt services went positive for us, right? We actually gained 120K. But, so then the question is, okay, discretionary, what's in that? What's in discretionary spending? Salaries. So what group in our town only went up less than 2.5%? None of them.
Yeah, but you make a good point, you know, maybe 2.5% is too tight, but 6.12% signals to me you're not even trying.
Well, okay, so hold on, that's a ratio based on student changes, right? So that 6.2, those numbers, those differences are a function of the amount of students they have in
They're
school.
down 46 students over last year.
From Paxton.
Total district.
Total.
But again, the ratio. So 6.12, it's a ratio. So I guess we can go in to argue about why we only went up 4.39 and Rutland went up 7.76 and Princeton went up 8.46. I think they're one of the smallest towns. We're not here to discuss each one of those. That's the problem they each have to deal with. But relative to Paxton, if we look at that 327,000, and we look at what budget we approved, if we figure that out, that is, so that's a 300K, that's this 300K difference. Of that 300K, I believe about 200 of it is discretionary, is non-discretionary spending, meaning the calculation. To your point, Mark, the problem with the math is that it doesn't handle districts like ours. There's only about, I think, 15 regional districts, and that is broken. So I think what you're poking at is we have a state problem. You can put it on Wachusett, but we have a fundamental state problem as it relates to the calculations and as it relates to the amount of money.
Totally agree. In fact, the evening that they presented, I said to the superintendent, you got to get 10 or 12 people in the room, and if we need to make some noise at the state level, then so be it. But this is not sustainable. This is broken. It's not working. And just passing it on to the towns. So our voting against it may be a signal to the entire Central Mass Legislative Caucus and to the state. But we got to start somewhere as opposed to, well, we're outside of 495, we're not going to get anybody's attention. I mean, I've heard that speech a number of times. I don't advocate for that.
Yeah,
I
agree
don't
with-
subscribe to that. Take a stance. This is too high. We can't afford it. You got to fix it.
Yeah.
And I think this is the year that if we put our flag in the ground, that another town is going to see it and hear it and maybe join us. And at least we've sent a message, and there's a cut in, and if the cut comes back, then that's less that we have to put as an override to the townspeople. which is ultimately our concern, because this is flowing to the override.
Usually that's too late, right? Because the budget ends at the end of June, right? So depending on when town meetings happen, we can follow that 100 more K. That's not going to change your 6.1% problem.
But you asking me if I would take a $200,000 reduction? I say, yeah, I would. I would. And I think it would also be a message that next year, don't come back with 6.12% again. Make an effort, make a cuts, do what you gotta do there so that the towns will support it, not only spiritually and in otherwise, but financially that they can support it. And right now, we can't.
Yeah, we have to be careful. You know, we heard from the fire chief that if we took 60K out of his budget and dropped 2 ambulance services, would be decertified and all this. If they dropped their AP classes out of Wachusett, let's have them cut the budgets, right, of 10, 15 teachers. I think unfortunately, I don't have the answer. So I'm saying all this, I don't have the answer. I don't have the magic silver bullet. But the problem is unfortunately, we're all living with a very similar problem.
Not 60,000. If 60,000 might be plausible.
Yeah.
Right, but it's still gonna hurt. But no, in our budget increase was 2.7% on the fire department. And really, on the contractual, the CBA side, the union side, we should have seen almost a 5% increase. Now, I was able to work the line items, purchase services, and I also worked equipment and all that stuff, so I could get a reduction there to make sure that I could meet what was requested of you, the finance committee, when we got the letter back in November, to keep it level services, so we didn't add any more bodies, we didn't add anything special to the service, and also keep it around that 2.5%. Now, I agree wholeheartedly with your argument about the school as well, because I have kids in school too, and that adds value to my home, the whole school district does, because it is a school, it's a good school district. So, but also, you know, we're all in this together, you know?
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it though, thank you. I just wanted to clarify the numbers.
Clarification.
266, yeah.
Sorry for
No, no
Building
problem.
on what Chief said, these guys, whether it was Chief Pichatory, Chief Savas, Travis, they came in and said, you know, here's what we did. We cut it down. We're going bare minimum. We made an effort. I feel like when Superintendent Riley came in, the first thing he told us was, I'm sorry that I have to present this year. And it felt like, here's the sandwich, you're gonna eat it. And you don't have a choice. There's gotta be a better budget than this. There's gotta be something, and it's not, I know what you say, taking out AP classes. Wachusett has got to get better at budgeting. They've got to find a way to get that 6.12 down closer to what the towns can handle. And I don't think that Paxton putting this on a second article, and if we say no, we're not going to be the only town. These numbers are very high. This is going to be hard to swallow. This is going to be hard to swallow for a lot of the towns. And again, I've got 2 kids in the school. I don't want to see the school. I don't want to see it go south, but give me a better shot than, take another shot and come up with something better than this. And what happens if they do, when do they have to come back with another budget? Or what do they do? When does it get to the point where they go to the 1/12?
August.
August?
That's when the 1/12 budget
Right.
kicks in.
So, into their school budget, you know, they had a much higher number and they kept pulling and pulling and pulling numbers down to get there. I know when he was here, he did a funding out of the free cash down here that doesn't grow by 2.5% every year. A couple of years ago, right before I started, their budget came in before Superintendent Riley took over. They came in at 0.39%.
Yep.
Right? So they already were backwards about 4%.
The center school is in a perpetual state of fundraising. There's 18 to 20 of them a year for the PTO because the school needs things. Is it because their budget isn't right? Is it because they're not getting enough money? I had to pay for my kid to graduate from 8th grade. They're having outside consulting firms come in to run fundraisers that they keep a double-digit percentage for the schools. Why? I mean, there's something fundamentally flawed with Wachusett's budgeting.
Yeah, but I think you saw, I think you saw a part of that in, I hate to say it, the outside placements. There's 100 kids getting placed outside the district at the cost of and that's been under budgeted and not accounted for.
Right, I
Right.
mean, again,
But again, that's a problem that he inherited, and,
then stop it.
no, I know, but
You know?
that's not as easy to
Geez,
think.
if you're
that
running
the
a
reason-
company and you're
No, I
hemorrhaging
know, but
money,
Jeremy, the
stop it.
reason that's happening, there's they can't just stop it. There's lawsuits and lawyers, and that's not something you
School
can just.
choice, they want to stay.
No, it's not school choice, those are special needs.
Oh, the special,
Yeah.
right, the special needs stuff,
So,
we looked
and
at
I
that
wholeheartedly
cost.
agree, like that, the
Yep.
fact that, and I don't even mind saying this, like, whatever happened there, I don't know who's investigating that or auditing that, that sounds borderline criminal to me, like, what happened there? There's a lot of money that was not being accounted for, so that's that needs to be figured out, because that's crazy. But it does sound like he's trying to do something about it, but it's not gonna be immediate, because there's no way, you can't just grab a.
Lost $3.3 million worth of additional Chapter 70 funding,
Right.
right? I understand that. But what the presentation didn't show you is they're still getting the 38 million. Okay, this is like you saying, well, I'm gonna do a lot with the raise I'm gonna get this year. Maybe you're not gonna get that raise. I know they've had it, and it hasn't been consistent because they didn't get it in 2022, but, that's something that you can't bank on.
No, that's what unions, that's the whole union contracts.
These guys are cringing back here.
And,
You have to be able to bank if it's in
those
the
are
contract, you have
those are
to.
negotiated.
Yeah.
You have no, and then, and again, for many years when I was there, you have, as we all know, you have health insurance premiums. Some years it stays flat, some years it goes up 15-20%, nothing you can do about it. Then you have the OPEC fund that we continue to try, woefully underfunded at Wachusett, and nobody has the extra money. So I think we've belabored this point enough. I think everyone has their views on what their point of things are, but I guess my final takeaway is you can't separate the school from the town, and we're trying, and I just don't think you can.
Well, they came to us in 2 warrant articles, and our position is to vote on the warrant articles as they're presented. And let me, I'm not backing away from my position, but I want to make sure I'm clear on something. I personally feel that the school district is blessed to have the superintendent that they have and the vice president of finance. If those two were not there, making the improvements that they are making, I can't even imagine where we'd be. But that's not the issue. The issue is the budget is not sustainable to the towns, and we're only one town with one voice, and I think we should express that voice. And there are going to be people are going to speak in favor of it, and there are going to be people that are going to speak similarly to the way I have. That's the beauty of having this particular article as one. Let their voices be heard, so.
I would just probably recommend that FinCom not opine on those last 2 articles yet, because the select board hasn't finalized the warrant. They have the meeting tomorrow. They have the
saved us
meeting
half
tomorrow
an hour.
night. Something could
Right.
change. It's always possible that something further changes.
Is this something we said?
We just voted
No.
on this at the town meeting?
I'm just saying, this has gone through a couple different renditions, right? It's always possible it could get changed again. I just want to make sure that you guys don't vote on something and then we're
Don't
upset
vote
because
on it
it's.
tonight.
But my concern is
When are
that
we gonna vote?
we've not always had a quorum at town meetings. So when would we vote on it again?
Well, I think our original schedule had FinCom meeting with Select Board and Capital hands by 5 PM on Monday. So the Select Board has to vote on those tomorrow. So the 2 ballot questions, or the whatever number of ballot questions they have, and the amounts, have to be in Lori's hands by 5 PM on Monday, so the Select Board will be voting on those tomorrow night. We also put on it, just in case, another provision to potentially open and close the warrant if they want to make any other changes. They have new information, if they have any additional thoughts. I know this has been something that's been very hard for folks to make it, to feel like they were confident in the decision.
Figuratively, pass over Articles 16 and 17 this evening. Okay. So now can we take one more look at maybe an old schedule in terms of the override options that we had? And do you have the rates that were assigned to these as well? Do you know the one I sent to you, that there was one missing, and
I
I think Jeremy looked at the 1.3 before we started,
Okay.
or he had the page open, the website,
Yeah, it's the budget
Jeremy?
memo, right? The bottom part of it,
Yeah,
with the 4 different types of money and how much goes to the
Yep.
school and how much.
I got that.
Are you looking for that, or are you
No,
looking?
I've got
I think
I've
he's
got
looking
every,
for the
I've got
tax.
it all.
He's looking for the tax one, right,
I
Mark?
know, this one, you want this here, and then you also wanted
The Excel sheet I did on Monday?
this one?
That's the 1.3.
The Excel sheet you did on Monday.
Yeah, it's called tax.
FinCom 24, what's today, this one? It's called an Excel sheet that you sent Monday?
Tax rate comparison,
It was this Monday?
yeah.
This one?
Yep.
Okay, so if we look at that one right there, I think it's, and you and Carol both correct me if I'm mistaken, it seems to me that the focus was on our 1,150,000, because that's what we had voted on the last finance committee to put forward. But the select board's focus was on 1,300,000, which is not on that schedule right now. Do we have the number for 1,300,000?
I can do it. 459,020, right, so Paxton,
Should auto-fill that middle box for you.
how much was it, 1,300,000?
You gotta change, oh, you might have to submit first.
Submit,
I'll see. Maybe it likes you. Oh, it does, you're good,
is that good?
you're good.
Well, just look at the 761. It's in the middle for you.
Yep, 761.97.
So if we go back to the other page that Heather presented, so we're looking at 765, which is our 1,150,000, or 761.
675.
675,
Or
I'm sorry,
760.
versus 761. I think we're only $150,000 away. 1,150,000 and 1,300,000. But the problem is that both of those were based on an $800,000 deficit, which I'm rounding again, is now 850. So my question is, does that change our baseline that we're working with, or how are we gonna manage that these numbers were on projections a week ago that have since changed? So if we just simply did what I just described, then the 1,150,000 would be 1,200,000. Because we'd have to add, I'm rounding up, 50 grand to the $800,000 deficit we used. And even though you have 840, the other numbers, that was after that particular schedule was prepared. My point is, I don't think we have final numbers in that middle column, which are really the numbers that are gonna resonate with the taxpayers and the townspeople. And I think we need to really zero in on what are those numbers for those options for Finance Committee and Select Board to recommend. Does that make sense? Because it's not 675. Because 675 was based on a deficit of 800,000. That $675 that led to the 1,150,000 was based on an $800,000 deficit. The deficit is 850 right now.
Are we adding the Bay Path 40,000 plus?
Into that, we were adding a certain amount of money from free cash. And what we basically chose was 250 of free cash. So do we cut that back to 200,000, which would 675 or 702? I mean, it's like, I can sell it at $599, but I can't sell it at $600.
They have a whole
I'm not trying to be
marketing
cute and retail-esque here, but I'm just saying, those are not the locked-in numbers that we're gonna decide on.
What number gets us to 699? What number gets us to 699?
Is it $1.66 a thousand, I think, Jeremy, on that website?
But I see what you're saying, like visually, someone sees
Right.
the 7 at the front versus 6 at the
Right.
front, they're worried about it.
But Mark, I think to your point, if we, our 150 at 675 in new taxes, the 675 doesn't change. What happens with that 150 is what changes. You're either gonna pull 50 out of what we would have put in free cash, 50 what we would have.
That's my question without
And
my having asked.
So the 675 is a good number. It's when you look at the sheet here that says we would put 100,000 to stabilization and 150 to capital depreciation, considering we had an 800 deficit. Now this changes. This goes to 850. Do you add another 50 here to make it 1.2? Do you turn the 250 to free cash into 200? I think that's what you need. But again, what was, when the select board met on Monday and talked about 1.3, what was that?
So I don't know if, I don't remember talking specifically about a number on Monday, other
I
than
do,
just
they were talking
reviewing.
they were talking about a deficit of 800 and free cash of 500,000.
So I think they were talking more about what the final override should consist of, right? What the components were. So I think that's where they were going. The idea that if you, at a very minimum, the real deficit is more than 848, right? It's the 848 plus really the free cash, at least, if not considering, the ambulance receipt. So at very minimum, it's those two pieces.
Jeremy, I have a question on your statement about taking the 50K. If we thought this was the right number, why wouldn't we increase it to 1.2?
I would.
Yeah, well,
Because
that's what I'm saying. If we thought the 100K in stabilization,
Right.
150, if that's
Sure.
what we believe as a finance
What
committee.
I'm asking.
Right.
Then
I'm-
we-
I'm
Not for me
100%
to
with you.
say, but for me to ask, and that's what I'm asking.
That's what
That
I'm
would
with
make
you.
sense.
Yeah.
And I would, if you believe in putting half the free cash and 100 back into the ambulance receipts and 150 and doing that, then yeah, put the deficit at 850 and then bump your number to 1.2.
Which means that the select board's number is not 1,000,003, it's 1,350,000.
50, yep.
Right. If you were looking
Yeah,
at a
keep-
deficit plus free cash at 500, it would be
Right.
1,350,000.
Right. Which we didn't calculate that. We just calculated 1,000,003. So what's 1,350,000?
$794.10.
So the difference seems small, $92, 702 to 794.
So what did we want to do with this?
I just wanted to put it out there, and I guess the question is, what do we need to do? Are we making a recommendation we made a recommendation, we voted for a number to send to the select board under advisement. So now the question is, what if they take our suggestion under advisement, but do something else?
Free will.
So I think right now, the issue too is, right, at Monday's meeting, the select board voted to make it two ballot questions, one for the town and one for the school, which brings us to the end of my memo, which is the best logical ways I could come up with to tie numbers, right, to that divide.
I think you need an advanced
Other than
math degree
arbitrarily-
to understand.
Was,
You need an advanced math degree to understand all the different.
well,
I know it's tough. Huh?
But I just try to tie it to some formula that we can say, okay, so this is kind of uncharted territory, right? We haven't been here, we haven't really done this recently in the past, so I don't have the right answer. I would say, at a very minimum, if the FinCom wants to revise their overall number, that would be a good motion to start with, and then perhaps the FinCom wants to leave it up to the select board to figure out, if they're gonna keep two articles, how they wish to divide the two, and maybe not make a recommendation at all in that piece. I don't know. It's up to the FinCom.
It's actually really up to the select board.
But I don't have the select board here, so
I
right
know,
now.
but I mean, again, we can make all the recommendations we want. We don't have any pull.
But it's up to your committee whether, how you wish to proceed with making.
Fair enough.
A recommendation
Yep.
to the SB.
Sure.
So if it ultimately is, we've had our fair discussion, the select board's been given this particular page, they know where we live, but if it's not official, I just want you to know that looking at this schedule, I prefer the $1 million one, not the $1,150,000 that now got moved up to $1,200,000. Because the $1 million is $588, and that, I think, has a real saleability to it, more so than $794 does. It's almost $200, more than $200 difference.
Yeah, I guess the question I'd have for you, Mark, is what's changed in the last week for you?
I was always in favor of a million, and I knew the
Okay.
votes weren't there, so I just said, okay, let's move down the page. How do you like 5C? And everyone said, yeah, I like that one
So
better.
if you're gonna say, if you wanna be the $1 million man, does this go to eight?
I like how
do we-
you said that.
Do we go to $1,050,000?
Nope.
What do? You take the
Million.
ambulance out, or you take 50 out of free cash?
Yep, the ambulance stays at 400.
Okay. So it's 800 and 150. 850 and 150.
850 and 150, $1 million, 588. That would be my strongest recommendation. Because what we need to keep in mind, we want this override to pass. And if someone has a choice of 794 or 588, I think 588 passes, I think 794 doesn't. And then we got a whole other problem coming back here. What do we do if the override fails? I want the override to pass. And I don't want to put words in the chief's mouth, but 350 or 400 is not going to break the ambulance special revenue fund. It's not. Don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't think it is.
Like, we're sure, like, you were sure about that, like, you're comfortable with that?
400?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this year, 400, so, I mean, I offered up 460.
Yeah, you offered
Yeah.
460.
I didn't want to go over the revenue that we made last year, which was 480. So, once we start treading that, change in calls, change in service.
I think you gotta balance the two, the palatable but effective, right? Can you look at the 1 million and say it's gonna be effective, but it's gonna be not hard for people to swallow?
I said this earlier, we should be doing what we can to minimize that amount, which is
Right.
what that does, and it sounds,
So you want to keep in mind, if we go to the million and it's 588, these are the same people that got to foot the 2.5 increase. This is on top of that.
right,
Same people that are going to have to foot water and sewer rate increase,
right.
and the same people that buy groceries and put gas in their car.
Well, and don't forget, and again, not that we can control this, but in Massachusetts, homeowners insurance is doubling for most people.
Right.
So there's a lot of costs going up for people. That's why I'm trying to be sensitive about it, but I also
favor
don't
of
want
the
to shed
lowest
a fire department or a police department, so. I think that's a compromise, I think it's
Is there a motion to recommend to the select board $1 million?
Stick with what I made last week.
Is it enough? So the $1 million would be 850, 150, and to make up for the last 3 years of free cash.
So I'm gonna ask you, does $1.2 million make the problem go away? No. The only one that makes it go away is $2.5 million, and I'm not trying to sell that.
That's a whole different problem.
And I think it's your point, Mark, it's the 588 plus the 2.5 plus all of the other increased expenses.
Right.
That's,
You like the $1 million?
so.
Take that in the form of a motion?
Is it a problem next year? Is the million?
It does. Everything's gonna continue to go up. I mean, at the end of the day, in my opinion, the 115 was not the ideal, but it was something that I thought as a group, we thought people could live with. if nothing changed and the select board meeting was Monday, we were willing to put forward a 115. I'm okay with keeping it 115 with we lost 50,000 because that number was wrong. But at the end, and Jeremy, you said this, or I think, this is gonna be ongoing, right? We know we're gonna have to pay this now and we're gonna get this money continuing on. But the problem is when was the last time anything got cheaper?
Right, yeah.
And so maybe the idea is if we do 115, and I don't know if it's gonna be the right number, but I think it's not the 588, it's not the 702 or 798, but it's something that will give us a little more tailwind next year. And then the year after, and the year after. As you said, Mark, what's 150,000 do to the town? It's a tough call. And if we just look at it, the 150,000, it's, you end up talking about $90. So let's break that down on a per month. It's less than $10 a month.
On top of the 2.5.
We're gonna pay the 2.5 regardless
I-
what, so it's less. so-
Yeah, I know, but we're talking like the 2.5 is like, it's just, well, it
Well,
has
it is
been,
there.
it will
It's
be an
supposed to be there.
automatic, so
Yeah.
that's always gonna, add to the
Yeah.
expense of living in the town.
Oh, it's the expense of living anywhere. I don't know any towns that don't add a 2.5 every year.
Yeah, well, I can't argue. I'm sure a lot do, but, yeah.
It's some radio silence here.
I make a motion to keep the 115 recommendation.
I'm going to second that motion.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I,
Opposed?
We probably should talk about joint meeting we have scheduled on Monday.
So the question asked last week was whether we move the auditors. We did reschedule the auditors till May. That's when he's available next. But we did have penciled in already the joint meeting with FinCom and Capital and the Select Board from a few months ago. It was agreed to do that meeting that night to go over recommendations for the different articles. So I don't know if FinCom still wants to come to the Select Board's meeting on Monday. We do have it penciled into the agenda.
It's
Oh,
also
it's
at
a joint
6
meeting.
o'clock.
It is at 6 o'clock, and the reason it's at 6 o'clock is we're gonna start with a 1 hour, sum it up, no more than 1 hour presentation with the departments in the event an override doesn't pass, what that actually looks like for folks and.
I'm
what
sorry,
those
you don't
impacts
even,
would be.
you don't even have it on the schedule yet.
Or is it 4?
I have to check my schedule.
Yeah. We may not have a quorum. Which speaks to the point of voting on the town budget and the Wachusett Regional. I would schedule it, I'll post the meeting, the joint meeting, and
Yeah, I might be okay, Mark, I just don't know for sure. yeah.
and maybe we'll draw a quorum.
Could we have an option to do a Zoom?
That defer to
I can
the-
clear it through the chair of the Select Board. If she's okay with it, I'm happy to do it.
I can absolutely Zoom, just will be out of town.
And just so I understand, this is to choose the final wording on all the articles?
Well, we're actually going to have to vote approval or disapproval for Wachusett and for the budget, whatever the final.
It's our recommendation.
Recommendation, right? And I mean, worst comes to worst, you can always say, make a decision at town meeting.
Right.
So it looks like the chair would be okay with that.
Okay.
So I can happily do the Zoom piece. But yes, so my envisionment for Monday is to have the 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock hour kind of be a slideshow. We got to get some information out to the public about, dates, times, information as well. We'll have a number. This Thursday, the Select Board will have a definitive number, so we'll know what number's there. It will also go through each of the departments in the event override doesn't pass, what that really means, what we'd be seeing for reduction of services. And then my thought is around 7 o'clock, we'd be getting into the article. So even if there wasn't a quorum for FinCom for 6, as long as they could be there for 7, I think that would be fine.
And our goal for that is really the vote on 16 and 17.
Yeah, I think so.
The goal is that, but the fallback is you could always vote on it the night of the meeting.
Our
which-
recommendation,
Which has
yes.
historically been very difficult to get a quorum, and then if we don't have a quorum, then we have a problem, because we've not formally voted on it with a proper quorum.
Yeah, but we discussed this at for the last town meeting. It was just something we would make our voices known at the meeting.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a way around it, yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say let the select board do what they would like to do. Obviously, they will on the 8th, and I'll post the meeting, and we'll see how things play out.
I'll Zoom.
Zoom would give us a quorum, but we respect the fact that maybe that's not the wish of the
Well, I think she said
select
that
board. All right,
we got the thumbs up for the Zoom.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
Good.
Already checked.
Good deal.
Make a motion.
Is there a motion to never meet again?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there any new business,
Oh,
old
sorry,
business?
apologize.
None.
Public comment?
Public? Anyone want to comment, in the public? Yeah.
Just to go back to the Wachusett Regional School District, to hear them say to cut, five teachers, or $500,000 would be what, 10 teachers or?
10 teachers and 22 parents.
To go with any budget, I kind of feel like that's a little bit of fear mongering, because when they're asking for $350,000 for a new intercom system, I mean, I feel as if there's other budgets they can cut, but to say they have to cut teachers is a little extreme. I don't know, I just think to say this is our whole budget and we need all of this, it's all essential, some things aren't. And I get it, they may have a fail, and that's just one, for instance, I wasn't able to be here for the whole thing, but I don't know. Just my 2 cents, sorry.
So just to clarify, if I remember correct, I think that was a security issue where people cannot currently communicate within the building they're in because their intercom system's not working. So I just want to caution people, right, when we hear pieces of things, we don't always have the whole puzzle. And sometimes.
The price, though, like,
Yeah.
I mean,
I understand, but as we know, things are expensive, right? Phone systems are $30,000, IT equipment to do Wi-Fi in the buildings in town is $50,000, They're expensive pieces, but I think it's important for us always to keep in mind that there's a reason for it. Great question, and we totally can always phrase it and ask for it, but I think just like when you see the presentation on Monday, you'll see from the departments, especially the large departments, the only place really for them to cut is actually personnel, because even though there's purchase services and so forth, some things you have to have regardless of the number of people you have working for you, and there's no other place to go.
and I understand that, and I get that, and again, that's the only, for instance, that I can think of right now, but, we're in a pretty big budget crisis. Yeah. So to ask for that this year, I mean, there could be a $20,000 fix where you go out and buy a bunch of portable radios and put them in the teachers' classrooms, and if there's an emergency, they can put something out.
And on the flip side, great question. When I asked about the student athletes and their fund collecting, I didn't get an answer. I have requested again with an email. I still haven't got an answer.
Can you drop that, because I think I owe.
I do too, but my point is,
Can we adjourn?
there could be potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars hanging out there for athletic fees that haven't been collected.
No, it
since
is
my
true.
kids were-
They don't do a good job of collecting.
They don't do a good job. If times are tight, you can't let hundreds of thousands of dollars slip, especially when you're asking schools to do so much fundraising because their budgets are off. Now you say, you've got 6,700 kids in the Wachusett district. If you have 3,000 of them playing sports, and that's kids who play multiple sports, at $150 a whack, do the math.
150, it's 250.
But it gets lower for the little kids,
Oh, yeah,
right?
that's what I'm saying.
Average $1.50, 3,000 participants in total sports. It's almost $500,000.
No, there were things that jumped out at me too, like I get it, and it's nice having you here because you know the guts of it.
Right.
But the transportation bid was weird for me too, that I get that there's semantics involved, but you go out to bid, you get one bid from your current vendor and it goes up 11.5%. That sounds like
Well-
things that used to happen with my old Italian relatives and,
Well, I don't know if everyone remembers, but the school board went through some nightmares during COVID shutdown.
Yeah.
They wanted to get paid, we weren't gonna pay them.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's one, nobody wants to get into the business of driving school buses.
No, no.
So, that's it.
Yeah.
But there's definitely some things there that really stand out.
And again, we're not saying that we don't want to support the schools, but, you know, if you're gonna come in and tell us that it's not a good year I don't have anything good to share with you, maybe, you know, I look into at least the questions that we're asking.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. Is that budget the best it can be? Are you doing the
Right.
best job you can, collecting every penny that you can and making that budget go as far for the kids that you can? That's all I ask for.
They have the same issue with funds, certain things. So that sport revolving fund can't be used for anything else. Just as a
No,
piece, just as a
understood.
piece of
But if
data.
you're not collecting it, who's paying for the refs? Who's paying for the buses, for the
Right.
students' uniforms, right?
You- Free cash.
Right.
Money that could go somewhere else.
Discretionary.
So it's, you know, you know where I'm getting, so, all right. That,
I don't want
point
to,
taken, good question, thank you.
yeah, I don't want to engage Ben and I again, but here's my point. If we never say no, they're never going to do what you suggested or you point out. That's the point. Send a message that this hurts, so you gotta hurt a little bit too. So, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? No. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions, none.
So Tony, pay your money.
Thank you,
Opposition?
everyone.
What's that?
Yep.
I know, seriously.
Thank